Beating yourself up is not discipline, and fear of not being perfect is not high standards. Today, we're separating true standards from self-punishment because beating yourself up isn't making you better. It's keeping you stuck, exhausted, and secretly hating yourself. And I know this because I've lived it. And I didn't lose my edge when I stopped attacking myself. I didn't get lazy, and I didn't even lower my standards. I learned and I grew exponentially more than I ever had. And best of all, I started to love myself, which feels a gazillion times better than when I hated myself. And if you're terrified that self-compassion will turn you into a slacker, this video is for you. Because here's the thing, having high standards is a totally different experience than having impossible standards and then beating yourself up for not meeting them perfectly. Fear-based standards sound like, if I mess up or make a mistake, I'm a failure, or I should already be further, or any thought that contains the word should, or why can't I get it together like everyone else? And on that note, other people don't have it together. Nobody does. All you see is other people's curated life, either on social media or even in real life. We're all wearing masks. So, and I tell my clients this, I've repeated this on other videos, and I even have to remind myself this. Just focus on yourself. Focus on if you're happy with you, if you're being the best version that you can at any given time, if you're living in alignment with your values. And I promise you, when you are focused on you, you stop even caring about what's going on with other people. At least in a comparison way. You can care about how they're doing, obviously. But my point is, the fear-based standards, they don't guide you to up-leveling your life. They control you and they keep you stuck. And they exist to keep you performing so you don't get rejected, criticized, or abandoned, because they were developed when you were a child or teenager so that you could survive in the environment that your caregivers were giving you. And again, like these survival strategies, they're actually very intelligent because they're keeping us emotionally or even sometimes physically safe. But the problem is, when we're fully functional adults, these behaviors are not serving us anymore, and they're actually causing us more pain, and they're not creating safety. Even though it may feel like it, they're creating pain. So real high standards, it's not about berating yourself. It's about anchoring into your values and actually facilitating healthy up-leveling. So true high standards sound like, I expect effort, not perfection. I can challenge myself without punishing myself. Growth doesn't always look perfect, and that's okay as long as I'm making progress and learning from my mistakes. So as you can probably see, one is coming from self-trust, and the other is coming from survival mode that was ingrained into our nervous system at one point. And one of the ways that this used to show up for me is I used to punish myself. And this is just one way, because I promise you there's more than one way that I used to punish myself. But one way was through food and exercise. I used to severely restrict my caloric intake to the point where I tracked it on an Excel spreadsheet that tracked my calories and all of my macronutrients. And I was severely under eating because I was also over exercising. And I would beat myself up in the gym. I ran 40 miles a week. Like my normal weekday routine is I would lift weights in the gym, and I used to lift really heavy weights, like almost as much as some men. And then I would run 6 miles. And like it was exhausting, but like I would tell myself that I had high standards and that I was pushing myself. And if I didn't run faster or lift more, I would like internally berate myself and beat myself up. But I also like wasn't giving myself rest or compassion. So I was always like extremely burned out. I It's not surprising. I would be injured. I ended up getting a hernia from lifting too heavy weights all of the time without rest. I also developed many running injuries, including stress fractures from running. And after my emotional rock bottom, I actually quit punishing myself through food and exercise cold turkey because life was so fragile that I literally could not even deal with the stress of either of those things. And this is one of the reasons why I inject my personal story into some of these videos, is because my point is, don't be like me, because I had to hit rock bottom before I made some of these changes in my life. But the truth is, you don't have to get to that point. You can change at any time, any age. All you have to do is want to change. So don't be like me. But back to what I was saying, overachieving women, like I used to be, like to tell themselves stories, which are beliefs, which are not truth, which are, if I'm hard on myself, then I'll grow. No, you will drive yourself crazy. Trust me. Like I just said, I drove myself crazy, and I know there are people watching this video who can relate. Because when you use pressure and you berate yourself, you may perform, but it never feels safe in your body. So you'll get some results, but you're anxious, you're burned out, and you're just severely disconnected from yourself. And you're not truly evolving. You're constantly bracing and hypervigilant to avoid anything less than perfect. So if the only way you can move forward is by hating yourself into action, that is not growth. That is self-abandonment. So what do true high standards really look like? Well, first of all, they're not loud, they are definitely not cruel, and they are also not dramatic. A real standard would say something like, this isn't aligned, I'll adjust. I can do better, I'll learn. I'll rest, then I'll try again. They don't berate your self-worth. They don't tell you that you're broken or that something's wrong with you. They assume that you're capable. So if your standards require self-betrayal, they're not standards. They're arbitrary survival rules that you've been blindly following because you didn't know better, but now you do. And also on this, there is a book, I can't remember the author's name. Her first name is Carol, but it's about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset, which I totally used to have, was like, if I'm not immediately good at it, I'm just not even gonna try. But a growth mindset is like this high standards mindset of, I can do something. The learning process may take time. I'm going to make mistakes, but I can learn and grow from my mistakes. So it's not beating yourself up if you're not perfect. It's having compassion for yourself along the journey and still holding yourself accountable for high standards, but not beating yourself up if you make a mistake, because nobody is perfect. Even like you talk to any like high level athlete or celebrity or whatever, and they get into the nitty gritty of their story, they're not perfect either. Again, we're just seeing like the curated version of people. So yes, if you are not familiar with growth mindset versus fixed mindset, I'm not gonna go into that more, but I highly recommend looking into that. So the action item for today, it's simple, but it may not be easy. When you become aware of your critical inner voice, so for example, maybe you make a mistake and your critical inner voice is like, I can't do anything right. You're going to reframe it to the truth, which is, I'm learning. And just to be clear, this is not toxic positivity. This is not pretending everything's fine. Again, you're going to reframe it with the truth. So you're not going to say something like, I do everything perfectly. This is great. Everything's fine. You're going to accept the fact that you made a mistake and accept the fact that you're learning. And another thing you can do is, because this is something that I've had to learn to do too, after you remind yourself that you're learning, also remind yourself of the mistake that you just made so that you don't make it again. Maybe you need to do something, maybe you need to tweak something, maybe you need to do something totally different. So also consider, what can I do next time? Because you're not truly learning if you're making the same mistake over and over and over again. So when you do make a mistake, no shame, just have that moment where maybe your critical voice does step in, but just accept, like, hey, this is not it. I'm learning, and this is what I'm going to do next time. And another thing, so this is actually 2 action steps. Another thing I want you to consider when you do hear your critical inner voice pipe up, ask yourself, would I speak to someone I love and respect in the same way? And if the answer is no, then reframe it to something that you would say to a friend or someone that you love and respect. Because chances are you wouldn't say to like one of your good friends, if they make a mistake, oh, you can't do anything right. So if it's helpful and if you can't really think of what the truth is, then think of what you would say to a friend or someone you love and start speaking to yourself that way. And again, when you do make mistakes, also think of what you can do differently next time so that you truly are learning and growing. So tomorrow, we will expose the biggest lie of all, and one that I used to believe, and that is your inner critic is your intuition. No, that is not true. And once you see the difference, you will never obey your critical inner voice again. So I will see you on the next video.